What if the very thing that made you different became the reason the world couldn't look away? Before she ever walked from a queen or sang under the spotlight, Karen Elson was a girl people whispered about. Too pale, too strange, too much. Yet somehow, that strangeness became her crown. A flash of red hair, skin like moonlight, eyes that looked both fragile and defiant. When she stepped onto the runway in the late 90s, she didn't just wear fashion, she haunted it. Designers didn't know whether to fear her or worship her. How did a girl once ridiculed in a small English town become the muse of Alexander McQueen, the wife of a rock legend, and later the author of her own redemption song? This is the story of Karen Elson, the red-haired enigma. Karen Elson was born in Oldham, England, a small industrial town on the outskirts of Manchester, where the skies often hung low and gray. Her family lived a modest life. Her father worked as an electrician, her mother as a caretaker. Glamour was a world away. As a child, Karen was quiet, introspective, the kind of girl who spent hours sketching and daydreaming. Her porcelain skin and fiery red hair made her a target for teasing. Classmates called her names, mocking what they saw as odd. But while others tried to dim her light, she was unknowingly cultivating something far rarer: presence. At 16, fate intervened. A scout spotted her on her way to school. Awkward, shy, and holding her books tightly against her chest. She didn't see herself as beautiful. Yet within months, she was flown to London to meet modeling agencies who instantly saw what the world had not: a face that felt like art. Her debut shoots were polarizing. Some editors said she looked too ghostly, too unusual for mainstream fashion. But others, visionaries like Steven Meisel and Peter Lindbergh, recognized something hypnotic. She wasn't the typical 90s bombshell. She was something else, entirely. Ethereal, haunting, unforgettable. It was the beginning of a transformation that would take her from the gray streets of Manchester to the most visionary runways in the world. When Karen Elson entered the fashion world, the industry didn't quite know what to do with her. The late 90s were ruled by golden tans, glossy hair, and commercial perfection. And then came this pale, flame-haired apparition who looked like she had stepped out of a pre-Ray flight painting. She was strange, magnetic, impossible to categorize, and that became her power. Her first breakthrough came when Vogue Italia, under the eye of Steven Meisel, chose her for a cover that would change everything. Shot in stark black and white, Karen looked haunting, like a dream you couldn't wake from. That image launched her into the world's imagination. She wasn't just another model, she was a story in motion. Designers who thrived on drama and fantasy took notice. Alexander McQueen, John Galliano, and Marc Jacobs saw in her a living canvas for art, not fashion. McQueen in particular was captivated. He cast her in his most theatrical shows, from Gothic brides draped in lace to dark angels walking through fog. On his runways, she didn't walk, she performed. Every step felt like a spell. Soon she was everywhere. Campaigns for Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, Louis Vuitton, Versace, and Jean Paul Gaultier. Her collaborations with photographers like Peter Lindbergh, Nick Knight, and Tim Walker produced some of the most cinematic imagery of the era, where her face was less a product and more a portal into emotion. What made Karen different wasn't just beauty. It was her ability to feel on camera, to embody sadness, strength, mystery, as if the lens were a mirror to her soul. She once said she didn't know how to pose, she just became. That authenticity set her apart from the perfection-obsessed world she inhabited. By the early 2000s, she was walking for every major house in Paris, featured on dozens of Vogue covers, and hailed as one of the defining muses of her generation. Fashion's once unlikely outcast had become its poetic heartbeat. And just as her star was at its brightest, life would lead her somewhere unexpected, into the world of music, love, and a whirlwind that would soon test everything she had built. Success in the world of fashion can be both intoxicating and merciless. For Corinne Elson, the same spotlight that once celebrated her now began to burn. By the mid-2000s, her career was unstoppable. Covers, campaigns, runway after runway, yet beneath the polished perfection, a quiet exhaustion grew. The industry that had worshipped her ethereal beauty also demanded that she remain frozen in it. Every photo shoot asked her to be a myth, not a woman, and behind that stillness, she was crumbling. When she met Jack White, frontman of the White Stripes, the connection was immediate. Two artists drawn together by creativity and chaos. Their relationship was a collision of worlds, fashion's surreal glamour and rock's unfiltered rebellion. They married in 2005 in an unconventional ceremony on a canoe in the Amazon. For a while, it felt like magic, the muse and the musician creating their own fairy tale. But the fairy tale darkened. Life between tour buses and photo sets blurred the boundaries between love, fame, and self-identity. She had spent a decade being shaped by others, designers, photographers, now a partner whose shadow was as large as his legend. Slowly, Karen began to disappear inside her own story. Interviews hinted at the strain. She spoke of anxiety, of feeling alienated from the world she had conquered. The demands of motherhood, the silence between creative highs, and the scrutiny of the press all carved at her confidence. She felt like I was losing myself, she would later admit in The Red Flame. By the time her marriage ended, she wasn't just facing heartbreak. She was confronting the question every artist eventually meets. Who am I when the performance ends? Her image, once the symbol of mystery and control, now carried traces of vulnerability. The same eyes that had transfixed the camera now revealed something far more human: fatigue, fragility, and the search for truth. But this fall, unlike so many in fashion's history, would not end in silence. It would become the foundation for a new voice, one she had never dared to use before. Success in the world of fashion can be both intoxicating and merciless. For Karen Elson, the same spotlight that once celebrated her now began to burn. By the mid-2000s, her career was unstoppable. Covers, campaigns, runway after runway. Yet beneath the polished perfection, a quiet exhaustion grew. The industry that had worshipped her ethereal beauty also demanded that she remained frozen in it. Every photo shoot asked her to be a myth, not a woman, and behind that stillness, she was crumbling. When the lights faded and the camera stopped flashing, Karen Elson did something few models ever dared. She started to speak, not through poses, but through music. She turned her pain into melody, her doubts into lyrics. In 2010, her debut album, The Ghost Who Walks, revealed a voice raw and haunting, a perfect echo of the woman behind it. Critics were stunned. She wasn't a model dabbling in music, she was an artist, unafraid to bleed truth into every note. Her songwriting became therapy, her stage a confession booth. Later, in her memoir, The Red Flame, she confronted the realities of an industry that glorified beauty but ignored the woman inside it. It was a story of survival, self-acceptance, and the courage to reclaim her narrative. She no longer needed to be anyone's muse. She had become her own. Today, Karen Elson stands as one of fashion's most enduring paradoxes, delicate yet defiant, ethereal yet deeply human. She has walked through the extremes of fame and emerged with something more lasting than perfection: authenticity. Her influence lingers far beyond the runway. Younger models and artists look to her as proof that vulnerability can coexist with strength, that beauty doesn't fade when you speak your truth, it deepens. Through her music, writing, and continued presence in fashion, she reminds the world that reinvention isn't about erasing who you were, but embracing every version of yourself. She showed that the flame others mocked could light an entire path. Karen Elson was never meant to fit in. She was meant to transform what beauty could mean. And in doing so, she turned her once mocked difference into her greatest masterpiece.